Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Today we're talking with Shane Rogers. Shane is a comedian, an author of, and a co-host of Midnight Facts for Insomniacs podcast, which is very cool. By the way, I've listened to a little bit when I started researching you a bit, and I really dig the podcast. It's a ton of fun, and I'm not saying that just because I'm talking to you today. I really enjoy it, man. It's great stuff. Today's podcast, we're going to focus on artistic creativity. Shane's been creating art his whole life, either through music, comedy, writing, or most recently, podcasting. Shane, I Google all my guests to do some research. Do you want to see what other Shane Rogers are in the world?
Yeah, let's find out.
Shane Rogers is a Fortune 500 CEO. Also a cybersecurity business lawyer.
Wow.
Shane Rogers has 4 IMDb credits on short films. You're a baseball player, an investment banker, and you also have an alternative country band called the Shane Rogers Band.
I am the most underachieving Shane Rogers that has ever existed. I'm bringing shame to the Shane Rogers lineage, apparently, because, boy, those guys are all doing better than me. I don't know about the country band. I do love country music, but I don't know that would be a career that I would want. But otherwise, I'd trade places with pretty much any of those guys.
Well, if you want to talk about underachievers, there's Matthew Miller. He is the spokesperson for the State Department. And there's a Matthew Miller. He is well published and he's on ESPN. He's like an NFL critic and pundit for ESPN. And so if you Google me, all you're going to see is State Department guy and ESPN analyst expert the whole time.
I think it gets worse and worse the more generic your name is, because I'm sure there's a million, if you're a John Smith, there's a million successful John Smiths out there. There's probably also some murderers and serial killers and things too.
I bet so. All right. So Shane's been pretty creative his whole life, always dabbling in artistic stuff. And I think it probably starts from the beginning, Shane. So where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Fort Bragg, California, but we were living in Oregon at the time. And so I lived in Oregon briefly, and then we moved to San Francisco. And yeah, it did start young because actually, I don't know if this came up in your research. I don't know where this would be online. But I was in a circus as a kid. My mom was the box office manager of a circus called the Pickle Family Circus in San Francisco.
Circus. That sounds great.
Yeah, and so I was an acrobat from age 9 to 14.
Wow. I was going to ask if you were really in the circus or your parents just did circus work and you just went around as a kid.
Yeah, for the first year, I just traveled with the show, but I really wanted to be in I wanted to be performing.
Yeah, what kid
and
wouldn't
so
want to be?
I sort of trained with all the acrobats, and I was a kid, so I was very elastic and malleable, and so I could pretty much, and I learned trampoline. I was pretty good on trampoline, but mostly I just did floor tumbling and juggling. And so, yeah, the second year I was in the show, and then after that, it kind of went from there. And once I got to high school, it became a little less cool to be the circus kid. It was like, instead of being the cool kid who was, getting to travel around doing fun stuff, it was like, now you're the carnival freak. And that was less cool. I got teased a lot, and I was like, I think I'm done with this. So at 14, I quit the circus. But yeah, so I have a little bit of a background in the performing arts, I guess.
That is spectacular. I love that, man. So I also read that you were in some bands growing up.
Yeah.
So how did you, what got your start into music and following that journey?
I think like every teenager, I was really obsessed with music. And at the time, the big bands were, I guess grunge was kind of the big thing when I was growing up, and Nirvana and Pearl Jam. And I wanted to have a band. And MTV was, huge back then when it was actual music television, and there was actual music on television. And so that's how I met my co-host of the podcast that I'm sure we'll talk about. I played guitar. I started playing guitar when I was around 13, and he is a great singer. And we were in bands together from pretty much late in high school up through all the way through college and a little bit of our, post college days as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Your pictures on your podcast website are great. Total, I mean, you check all the boxes for like grunge high school
Yeah,
kids in a band. I
totally.
was smiling looking at those. I was like, man, look at those 90s hoodlums right there. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah, we
long
both had.
hair, all
Yep.
that stuff, man. I was like, yep,
Yeah.
there it is.
Yeah, we had the long hair. We had, I got really into like heavy metal too as a teenager. I think when Duncan and I first met, he was really into like Korn and everything, and you can kind of
Yep.
see that in his picks. And yeah, I was definitely like, Megadeth and stuff.
Right, right,
Um
right.
and then we went the sort of more grunge route, and then we went more like pop rock. We had all of our phases through because it was
Yeah.
many years. It was like over a decade of playing together.
that is that is great. I was in marching band. That doesn't count as the same though. Because
Marching band's fun.
I'm a so my full time job, not just podcaster. I'm an elementary music teacher,
Oh, nice.
and I've taught elementary music, high school music. I do private lessons, and so I never got to the bands with my friends. We all did. We all wanted to be like ska bands, right? We all played some kind of horns or something like that. So we
Mm.
always tried to get a ska band together, but that never came about. But we
Oh,
did
that'd be fun.
try
I
it. We
I had
tried that a
my
lot, though.
yeah, I definitely had my, cherry poppin' daddies phase and everything.
Yes, I got to see them in concert. They came our way, and the Zoot Suit Riot and all that fun stuff. Man,
Love it.
we dug it. What were some of the like gigs and venues you got to play when you're in high school?
Oh boy. Well, in college was when we really kind of had, that was our missed opportunity back then because we
Yeah.
had a really good band in college. It was called Maybe Never. I was at UC
Oh,
Davis.
that's a good name.
And yeah, and we were touring. We did a lot of, I mean, most of our shows we did in sort of the Sacramento area because that's near Davis, but we were always going down to San Francisco. We were able
Yeah.
to tour around a little bit. We did some shows in LA. We got a little bit of traction. I mean, we were on college radio at Davis and had some songs that I still love. I'll still throw on some of our stuff to this day. We were definitely a good kind of college party band
Yeah.
as well. We would
Hmm.
play a lot of frat and sorority parties and stuff. Um,
Fun.
yeah, it was a good time. It was contentious. It's always hard when you're five young men in a band trying to gel together
Right.
and with different lives and different things going on. I was at UC Davis. Duncan was in a different school. A couple of the other guys had like kids. It was just tough, and I
Yeah.
think we were honestly we were a really good band. We were very proficient. I think we put on a good show, but it just wasn't sustainable long term.
Yeah. I've got a good buddy from school, and I can't tell you how many bands he's rolled through, and
Hmm.
all of them are trying to find that little window of opportunity, and then you try. Nothing ever seems to happen. But
It's
he's
hard,
done.
and I mean, we opened for some bands that really proved that it's not just about talent because I mean, there was a woman who had a band called Storm Incorporated. Her name was Storm Large. The most talented singer songwriter I've ever met in my life. Just incredible and beautiful. She looks like a model. She's amazing. And she ended up she's had success in music, but not, I mean, she should be everywhere. She should be
Right.
massive. And everyone that I turn on to Storm is like, oh my God, this woman's amazing. And she didn't make it big. She got a career. She can support herself, but like the fact that she's not everywhere is we looked at people like that and we were like, okay, what are our chances?
Right.
It's so much of it is just luck.
Yeah. You've got a million and one people all trying to find that same window.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
you
100%.
just right place, right time to get there. So what was your major in college while you were trying to get your band together?
I was an English major, which probably helped. I didn't have to work super hard. So what I had done is I went to College of the Redwoods, which was like a community college for 2 years, and it was the only one in California that has dorms, I believe. And Duncan and I went there together. We did band stuff, and then I transferred to UC Davis on a scholarship. And I was really worried about maintaining my scholarship. It was a full ride scholarship to Davis, so they covered everything,
Yeah.
which was great. But I had to maintain a 3.5
Yep.
GPA. So I was like, I'm going to do the thing that I is easy and I know I can do well at. And then my plan was law school or grad school after that. I did take the LSAT and the GRE. Did pretty decently, but I ended up just kind of moving to Santa Cruz with a bunch of friends. Duncan was at that point attending UC Santa Cruz, and we had a band here. And I ended up in this working at this resort as a recreation director. And then I kept getting promoted and just never ended up going to grad school. And now I've been doing
Right.
that forever. Now I'm a spa and recreation manager.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
You
life is
never
weird.
know. You never know where life takes you, man.
You never do.
My brother's got a degree in anthropology, but he works in pharmaceuticals. It has
Wow,
nothing to do with his degree at all.
that's a
And
pivot.
he just lucked into that because he couldn't find any work in anthropology anywhere once he graduated,
Yeah.
and he just on a whim put an application at Pfizer that we have here in our town, and just moved up, like you did in your resort, and then lo and behold, that's what his career is working over there.
Wow, good for him. Yeah, life is random.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, it's very interesting to look back when I was a teenager or a kid and wonder what that person would have thought of me and where I ended up. Because, no
right.
one, it's no one's aspiration to work at a resort, but I also really enjoy my life. So it's going
Yeah,
well.
well, I guess you can't put a price on most things, but happiness with your job is pretty priceless, especially for the people that are still looking for
That's what it is.
happiness
And
with their job.
it creates a certain inertia because I don't hate my job. I just enjoy going. It's like a beautiful place. We have 300 acres of redwood forest. It's like an amazing. I have great
Oh my
staff.
God,
I have a
that
lot of
sounds great.
autonomy, and so I
Yeah,
just can't leave. Like every time I've thought about like I need to go do something else with my life, I'm like, yeah, but
yeah,
but then I probably won't enjoy my job. So
yeah,
it kind of keeps you in like a golden cage. But I'm enjoying it so far.
yeah. That's what matters. All right, sir. So let's talk about what you're doing now. How did before podcasting, you did a fair amount of time on stage as a stand-up comic, right?
Yeah, yeah, about 12 years.
That's so you did stand-up comic still a resort director at the same time.
Yeah, and that's again, that was part of the reason that I've stuck with this job is because it just gives me so much freedom. Like
Yeah.
I'm the boss of my area. I have like 50 employees. It's nice. I can kind of make my own schedule. So it's been really nice that I'm sort of able to cruise in and cruise out when I need to. So it allowed me to do other things like that. When I graduated from college, I had at UC Davis had a weekly column in the newspaper, and it was a comedic column. And so I was always writing funny things. And so I had just so much material because I'd always wanted to be prepared. So I was producing a lot. And when I graduated, I didn't know what to do with all this stuff. And so I put it up on a website that I called, I think, One Last Real Thing. And I just had all of these kind of funny observations
Right, right,
and
right.
little episodes. And I got a small following, and one of the people who was a huge fan of it was the manager of a comedy club in Chicago. She was actually the manager of the director or manager, general manager of the Laugh Factory in Chicago at the time. It had just opened, and she was like, "This is great. Have you ever considered stand up?" And I thought, okay, well, if someone who's in the industry thinks maybe this would be good, maybe
Right.
I should try it. And so I didn't for a while, and she finally convinced me. And I actually flew out to Chicago and did my first set out there on stage, and it went okay. I learned quickly that like the stuff you write for a college newspaper does not translate all that well into
Right.
you know rim shot jokes on stage. So I had to learn a lot, but that was how it all got started, and it just went from there.
Fun. Yeah, man. I'm a little low key jealous of college band, stand up comic. Uh, yeah, I've always wanted to do stage work, but that never seems, as you said, life always takes one direction or another.
Yeah,
Uh,
life gets in
um,
the way.
can anybody see any of your comedy online? Is it up anywhere?
There are a couple clips. First off, there are some clips that I think people uploaded that I didn't sanction. I think there are a
Right.
couple that you'll find from like some of my really early sets. There's me doing this bit about a cat that I was the first thing that ever really worked on stage. I think it was like the bit that I started with, and I did that for probably a year because it was the only thing that
Right.
really worked. I think that's on online, and then there are a couple little clips of stuff that I put up on. If you go to www.shanerogers.net, there are a couple little clips of kind of, I don't know. I liked to put up little things that I probably wasn't going to actually use in sets,
Right.
just to give people a sense. So they're older stuff that I wasn't doing anymore. But yeah, you can get a little taste. But I tried to really control what I put up. And when I started, there wasn't TikTok, or at
Right.
least
Right.
there was like YouTube, but I was really not trying to get an online presence. A lot of it, you just didn't want to kind of waste your material, so I wouldn't put stuff out. And then when I stopped, and I would only send stuff to bookers. So a lot of the clips and things that I have were set to private, and were only for people to
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
book
Yeah.
me.
Gotcha, sir. Gotcha. All right. So, how did your podcast? I'm going to make sure I get the name right because I'm terrible with names. Midnight Facts for Insomniacs podcast. Really great work. How did podcasting get started?
So it was kind of a natural evolution from comedy. There was a point at which it seemed like every comedian that I knew was starting a podcast, and I
Right.
felt like, okay, I guess this is the next thing. This is what I have to do. I really didn't. Again, I didn't want to get on TikTok. I didn't. There were just I wasn't following the normal template, and so I felt like in some way I have to start playing the game. And
Yeah.
so me and another comedian started a podcast called Midnight Speakeasy, and he's a great friend of mine. And I think it was a fun podcast, but we didn't really know what we were doing. Our equipment kind of sucked. We were just figuring things out based on a Google search of how to podcast, and
Right.
um, so it was a little bit of a misstep in the beginning. But I got some experience and learned a little bit about podcasting, and then uh, right before quarantine, he moved to Las Vegas or the surrounding areas. And so I had to decide whether I was going to continue doing a podcast, maybe try to go it alone, or what I wanted to do. And it just occurred to me that Duncan, my friend Duncan, who I had been in bands with all my life, is one of the funniest people I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
Yeah.
can do accents, he can do impressions. He's just hilarious. He never wanted to do stand up comedy, and I was always trying to push him to do it. And I was like, I have this guy that I've been friends with forever. We have amazing chemistry. We just, we know everything about each other. Maybe this would translate on the microphone. Let's
Right.
just give it a shot. And so we came up with this concept. It was based on there's another podcast called Stuff You Should Know, and then there's a podcast called The Dollop, and I wanted to
The
sort of cross
Dollop. Yes.
pollinate.
Yeah. I know the
Yeah,
Dollop real well. That was an early podcast I got into.
yeah, I love
Yeah.
The Dollop, and I figured, we could do something like that. They do really really long shows about and kind of meandering, and they're very funny, but they go off topic a lot, and it kind of is, they're very silly, and they do just historical stuff. And then Stuff You Should Know is two guys who are a little less funny. They're more kind of straight,
Yeah.
just talking about an in-depth subject. They just do some research and then they talk about the subject. And I liked the format of The Dollop, but I wanted to have more flexibility. And so we do something similar. It's what we decided is that we would recreate our sort of natural dynamic, which is Duncan. I've always been, I had a very research oriented, academically oriented
Right.
personality. I was,
Yes.
like I said, I had
You're an English major.
I was an English major. I had a scholarship to school, and I was always doing research. And so I would teach Duncan a lot of stuff. I was always telling him about, the new thing that I was researching, and he cares less about things like that, but is always receptive to learning. And so the Dollop is kind of similar, where one of the guys
Yep.
basically explains the topic to the other guy.
Hmm.
And so that's what we sort of decided to do. And this was actually before we'd ever heard the Dollop. I found out about it later. And I was like, this is great. These are two things that we can meld. And so that's what it became, is that when we started, we just chose topics that we were interested in. Now we have a
Right.
pretty active Discord community. We have like 600 something people in there, and they choose the topics. They suggest the topics. They vote on them. And so, for instance, last week was ghost towns, creepy ghost towns.
Yeah. Yeah.
We did one recently on black holes, which was really interesting. That was a lot of research. We've done this one that's coming up that Duncan doesn't know about that we're going to be recording today is dangerous viral trends. So we've done a little bit of everything, UFOs. And so it's fun. It always keeps it fresh. And then during quarantine, and so we started doing that. And then during quarantine, obviously couldn't do stand up. So I put a lot of
Right.
energy into the podcast, and it just started to gain traction.
Well, that's outstanding. Yeah, it's really good work. I was listening. I was like, this is sort of like the dollop,
Mm-hmm.
and really great stuff. I was really laughing. Uh, I think it was your maybe episode about PETA,
Oh, yeah.
maybe, but it was the beginning part where you were telling your listeners about how you felt good because I guess in the prior episode had some sort of religious take and they were all praying for your soul or something like that.
Yeah, we have a great group of
uh,
listeners. It's really interesting because I'm very skeptical. Like, I don't believe in ghosts. I'm not religious. I don't have any paranormal or spiritual uh, beliefs.
right,
And our listeners, at this point, we have a pretty large listenership. And so they're very diverse. And a lot of them are religious or do believe in ghosts and things. And so it's interesting to correspond with them. I get a lot of messages and from people who are offering to save my soul since I'm not doing it myself. And I
right.
appreciate that. It's nice of them to do that. It's funny
uh,
that you listened to the PETA episode. That episode got the least downloads of any episode we've done in the last probably year and a half. People did not want to hear about PETA.
yeah,
And I
I
think,
was. I mean, your research was great. I was like, "What is that true? Is that really true?"
yeah.
And your buddy Duncan, he was like, I didn't get any message about my soul. I guess they just gave up on me.
Yeah, I think they have. He's known on the podcast for being. It's funny because I'm probably the more cynical one in our real life, but I think that people have this view of me since I'm kind of running the show, so I have to keep it kind of upbeat of
Right.
as me being a little bit more you know, I don't know, peppy, and Duncan's like the cynical one. And I think in real life it's maybe switched. I'm probably even more cynical than Duncan is.
Yeah. So, so you do all the research and then Duncan just kind of comes in blind, right, to the
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah, and that was not really, we weren't trying to recreate the dollop. That actually was just Duncan is not willing to do research. We have done a couple or a few at this point host swap episodes where he comes in and
Right.
does the research. He hates it and he drags his feet and complains about it the entire time. So it was honestly just the way things were going to work. If I wanted Duncan to do the podcast, I was going to have to do all
Right.
the research and he was just going to
Hmm.
show up. He's like, fine, I'll do it, but I'm just going to show up. And so
Yep.
that's how it works is I'm lucky enough at this point that I have some help. We have some listeners who help me with particularly llama trauma, my research minion, and then some other people who will help out with the research aspect of it. They send me links, they send me sources, and then I kind of compile all that. And I still have to do a lot of research.
Right.
It
Right.
takes hours for each episode, depending on how much I already knew about it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Can
it's a
only
lot of work.
imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, you're a good friend. You gotta know your role in any relationship, whether it's friendship or marriage or all right, I just have to be the one that does this.
And it ends up working
uh,
out well that way. And also
right.
what I realized over time too is that I'm so much of a control freak that I'm not comfortable with even the host swap episodes that we do are nice because it gives me a week off. But
Yeah.
I also dread them because I'm too much of a control freak, and the way he runs the show is not the way I would run it. And
Yeah,
so
I
I
know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah. So it
Uh,
ends up being, even though it's good for him to just have to show up, I don't think I would want it any other way because I just couldn't handle it.
yeah, I mean, I'm the same way, like at school or running a concert, or even if I'm at someone else's school concert, I'm always like, wait, why are you doing that? That's not how I do things. You should be doing the blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I'm the guy who in college, like if we had to do a group project, I would be like, "How about I just do it, you guys, and I'll put your names on it,"
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I
yeah.
just want to make sure that it gets done right.
Oh, you should hear my daughter. She's in college now, and they do a group assignment, and she's like, "These folks are in college. Why am I having to push them and tell them what to do and all this sort of stuff? She
Yeah.
can't hack. She hates not having control too. She's
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
gets a little bit of that from me. I don't know, but yeah, it's fun to mention it. So your podcast started just like everyone else's. You start it and you get it going, and nobody listens in the beginning. You got to put it out there, put it out there. How do you think you got Midnight for Insomniacs? How do you think you got that rolling and gotten to its popularity where it is now?
I think some of it was, again, we talked about storm large and just being in the right place at the right time, and not a lot of it being luck. That is kind of what happened with us. It didn't happen with us with music, but the podcasting just happened at the right time. And then there was part of it that I think was calculated. I did have a little bit of a fan base as a comedian, which was nice. I had kind of like a list of people that I could send things to. So
Right,
I was able to say, hey, I'm starting this new podcast. I'm taking it a little more seriously this time. Everyone jump on board. So we had a little bit of a listenership in the beginning. It wasn't large, but when you've got a couple hundred people who are listening regularly, that
right.
feels good and it keeps you going. But we definitely weren't taking it very seriously. I had mentioned to you right before we started recording that all of the first episodes of the show were recorded in my car. We would just drive somewhere, park, talk for a couple of, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes. Duncan
Yep.
was usually drunk for the first few episodes. I mean, in those first episodes, you can hear that he's wasted. We were not
Uh,
taking it seriously. We were just, it was me and him doing what we do, which is,
right.
sit around and give each other a hard time and have fun. And it started to pick up right before quarantine. We started seeing the numbers going up.
That's because people were listening there. Everybody was home or sitting around.
Yeah, as the
Yeah.
pandemic kind of hit, people had less to do, and so I think they started looking for things to listen to. Also, the people that were listening already had more free time to kind of promote the show, and we really
Yep.
asked them to do that. But we still weren't taking it seriously. And then as it started to grow, we started seeing the numbers grow, and we realized, like, oh boy, we either have to get better at this and take it more seriously, or stop, because we're getting to the
Yeah.
point where people are expecting more from us and
Right.
actually promoting the show on their social media and stuff. And I don't. There were some of those episodes I was like, I don't want anyone promoting this. Like, I don't. We're just messing around. We don't want people to hear this. So we realized, like, we need to either go all in or just quit. And
Right.
so we just went all in, and we decided, it really, I think, was when June, there was a kind of a super fan that we have who started the Discord channel for us. The Discord server, she messaged me and said, basically, hey, you have a little fan club. Do you want to join it? And I didn't know what Discord was, and was like,
Right.
went in there, and there were all these people talking about us, and they were excited to have me there. And I was like, wow, this is serious now. So we started growing. She gave me the Discord server, taught me how to use it. We started growing that element of it. And as we had more and more fan interaction, and they became more invested in the show because they were choosing the topics and
Yeah.
debating the topics and voting on the topics, people really started promoting on social media, and it just started to snowball a little bit. And
Yeah. Yeah.
we realized that, we had something here. And then by the end of quarantine, once I tried to go back to doing comedy, comedy was a little bit weird at that point. All the tables were far apart. It felt
Yeah.
comedy just felt strange. And I was like, I'm just going to put all my effort into the podcast. And I also suddenly didn't have as much time as when I'm going back to work now. I don't have all the amount of time to research. I really had to choose one. And so I started just putting all of our energy into the podcast.
Yeah. Well, that sounds great. Super fans. I need to get a couple of those.
I'm telling you, the biggest thing for us was to leverage our fans. And at first, it feels weird because you feel like maybe you're exploiting people because they're not getting
Right.
paid for this. But what you realize is, like, now at this point, we have a Patreon. So we have people who are paying us to do the podcast. And there are other people who maybe they don't have money that, extra income that they want to spend, or that they want to spend, but they have free time. And they're like, hey,
Yeah.
I would love to do something to give back for this show that I'm enjoying. And so we had to kind of get over the whole thing of feeling like no, we'll do it ourselves. We shouldn't be using our fans that way. And now it's like, no, if you guys want to help out, hey, here's what you can do. And they've been
Yeah.
amazing. Like, it's just been so much fun to sort of leverage the fan base to grow itself. And that, they do more we did a couple little ad runs in the beginning with Spotify where we like bought ads on Spotify, and that was good, but it was never as much as just actually having your fans go out and do the
Yes.
promoting for you.
Right. Man, well, that's fantastic. Yeah, you should definitely check out the podcast, Midnight Facts for Insomniacs. It's really great stuff. If you like listening to two guys horse around and learn about a topic or a subject, it's really fun stuff. I highly encourage it. All right, Shane. So I've got a couple of kind of fun questions for you. What is your favorite kind of podcast topic to do? Like, what do you
Ooh,
like get really excited about? What kinds of stuff?
that's a good question. It's interesting because I have found that I'm not a good gauge of what I'm going to enjoy. Weirdly
Yeah.
enough, I have even vetoed topics before and just gone a different direction because I'm like, I don't want to do that. I should have done that with PETA, but I didn't. But I actually thought PETA was going to be interesting. It was very controversial. It only won by like 1 or 2 votes, which probably one of them was mine.
I
And
found it interesting. That's for sure. I learned a whole bunch.
I did find it interesting once I was looking into it, but it was hard. I had to watch a bunch of animal abuse documentaries. It was tough. But a lot of times they will suggest a topic and I am not excited about it, and then it ends up being completely fascinating for me. Black holes was one where I was like, okay, this is kind of course everyone's going to ask about black holes, and we're just going to talk about gravity, and space time and whatever, and it's not going to. And it was just absolutely. I went down, the black hole rabbit hole, so to speak, and it was amazing and really fun. It got probably more in depth than it needed to, but is a really interesting episode. Anything science related is usually interesting for me. We get a lot of requests for like paranormal episodes, which just ends up being me debunking things, which is less fun for the listeners, I think. So we try to avoid doing a lot of paranormal stuff. And also we get a lot of requests for true crime. And we did have fun. I don't know if you know, but we live in Santa Cruz, California. And Santa Cruz was called Murderville in the 70s because it had 3 active serial killers at the time, one of whom, Ed Kemper, is very famous. And so
I was born in West Covina, California, in LA County. And when I grew up, it was what was he called? The Midnight Stalker, I think. Was our murder at the time. I remember growing up and everybody being wigged out.
Yeah, my mom grew up actually in San Francisco when the Zodiac Killer was active, and so I'm not that big of a true crime guy. Those were actually interesting episodes to do. But I try to mostly kind of avoid true crime and paranormal, which to our detriment, because those are the 2 most popular subjects for podcasts. People love paranormal and true crime.
They love true crime. Everybody tells me about the true crime podcast they like to listen to.
Yeah, so it is a little bit unfortunate that we don't go. We're probably going to start going in that direction a little bit more, just because there's so much demand for it from the Insomniacs. That's our listeners. We call them the Insomniacs. And those do end up being interesting for me. But again, it's mostly the science ones, anything kind of related to natural phenomena. Those are all really fascinating.
Well, I hope all your Insomniacs listen to this episode and they were like, oh, Shane likes science stuff. Let's tell them all the science stuff we want them to look at.
There you go. I don't think they care what I like. That's one thing I've learned is like I can put out, you think that you're kind of a celebrity to your listeners, and they think of us as their friends because they just hear us, BSing so often.
Yep.
That totally. I'll be like, come on, guys, choose one of these. And they're like, screw you. We're doing what we want.
What kind of topics do you guys not do? Like, no, we're not doing that.
There hasn't been much that I've vetoed without ending up doing it. When I have vetoed things, usually it's because I'm just not in the mood for it, but I get around to it because I do want to honor what they want. So sometimes I'll veto something and then go a different route. I did an episode on taxes and no one was excited about that, but I was, because I had learned a bunch of stuff that I thought was interesting about how taxes started and the tax code. And everyone it ended up being a really fun episode, but no one was thrilled that I had vetoed whatever topic they had to do taxes. So it didn't go over incredibly well. But then I ended up doing, I think it was like spies or something. I did that the following week. The only one that I have completely vetoed and not brought back was children killers, like not people who kill children, but
But
children who have
children who,
killed. And there's like all
right.
these instances of children who have either killed adults on purpose or killed other kids. So
Yeah.
it's almost like little mini serial killers. And boy, I was researching that and I was like, there is no way to make it. We pride
No.
ourselves on being able to make most episodes not very dark. We keep it a little bit light.
No,
We're able
it's
to find the humor in it. I think
yeah.
PETA was a good example of like, that was tough. There's a lot of like, monkey abuse and things that I don't want to know about, but we try to keep it light. That one, there was no angle to keep it light. And I was just getting more and more depressed. And I was like, I'm not doing this, you
Yeah.
guys. Nope.
No. My I don't know. I think it's because I watched Gremlins at such a young age that I can't stand horror stuff. It's just like I don't want to watch it. Like I don't. My wife loves horror movies, and I've got a good friend of mine. He manages our local movie theater, and he makes horror movies,
Oh,
for
well.
fun, indie stuff. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to watch this or not. It always gives me the wigs, and so having to like, all right, you're going to talk with somebody who kills babies and eats seals. That's going to be your podcast person. I was like, oh, I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah. Again, it is interesting that some of the episodes that I was not super excited about, we did an episode on the Fermi paradox, and that doesn't sound like an exciting topic, but it ended up being really interesting. That was actually suggested by, I think, my stepdad at the time. And
Yeah.
I diving into that, I was like, I don't even know what I'm going to say about this, and it ended up being really fascinating. So sometimes they give me a topic, and I'm like not thrilled about it, and then once I get into it, it becomes really one of our more interesting episodes, I think.
All right. Going back to your college days, what was your favorite song to play with your band?
Like cover song or our
Any
actual.
cover song, original song? What did you just enjoy doing each time?
We had this song called Drunk, and how appropriate for being
Yep.
college kids, and it went over, as you might expect, really well at
Yep.
at
I
college
can agree.
parties.
I can think so.
We played a lot of frat parties. We played sorority parties, which was interesting because those are usually dry. There was no alcohol there, and we'd
Yeah.
play a song called "Drunk" at a sorority party where everyone's sober. Those were not as fun, but yeah, that song was great. But we used to do some cover songs too that actually people wouldn't always expect. Duncan is an amazing singer, and one of the songs that we would cover was "Give Me One Reason" by Tracy Chapman, and
Yep.
Duncan can crush that song, and it's just really fun to hear a guy singing. I don't know if you've heard the version of Fast Car that Luke Combs
Yeah.
did,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like she has such an incredible voice, and having a male voice on it can really add a lot of texture too. And so it was really fun. People loved that song. They would ask us to do it again and again.
What's the best comedy gig you've ever performed at?
Oh boy. The best comedy gig I've ever performed at. That is tough. It's so much easier to come up with worst comedy gigs, but I
I
think
can see that too.
um my favorite venue was the club where I kind of started. The first club where I got like passed as a comic was this place called Rooster Tea Feathers. It's in Sunnyvale, California. And they have like, I've just had such amazing shows there. I've gotten to do some really big venues, and, doing fun shows, opening for some comics that I really respect and enjoy. And I've, been on stage with some people that are amazing. I've done shows with Sarah Silverman. I've done shows with, people that everyone would know. And then
Right.
some sort of comics that are maybe a little second tier that are some of my favorites that I've gotten to work with. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've done, Comedy Day in San Francisco is always really fun. That was started by um, a bunch of actually really famous comics, including Robin Williams. I think he was like kind of the cornerstone of Comedy
Right. Right.
Day.
Right.
And it takes place in Golden Gate Park, and it's kind of an honor to be chosen for that. And I did that a couple times. The show itself isn't always great. It's outdoor during the day, which is never
Yeah.
the best thing for a show, but it's so fun hanging with all the amazing comics backstage. Yeah, and so there's just a lot of great memories, but probably the ones that stick out more, like the terrible shows.
The
Those,
bombs. The
yeah,
bombs.
those are
But we
fun.
won't talk about those.
Yeah.
So you've done some music, you've done some writing, some podcasting. What do you think else you're going to get into? What do you think? What kind of artistic outlet do you think is next for Shane Rogers?
That's a good question. I don't know. My mom is famous for like jumping from hobby to hobby. She's done a million things. She's incredibly talented. She's a Renaissance woman. She's done a little bit of everything. Um, I tend to stick to things for a while. Once I get my teeth in something, I just try to make it work. And that's how it was with music for us. I mean, we really wanted to make music work, and we knew we were good enough, but we just weren't the right band for the right time, or we
Time,
just
yeah.
didn't have our break. So with my plan is really to stick with podcasting at this point. Like, honestly, this is sort of our retirement plan. Like, at some point, what I'd like to do is, once you never get too old to just talk on a microphone.
Correct.
And
You
so
got it.
I'd love to continue growing this, and then when we retire, we would have hopefully a sustainable income just doing this on top of our
Yep.
retirement. So that's kind of the plan now. I really get a lot out of doing this, and so for me, unless it becomes unfulfilling, or I start to
Yeah.
not enjoy it, this is kind of my plan going forward.
Yeah. It's you and me both, brother. My wife thinks I'm nuts, but I was like, hey, man, I'm like 5 to 6 years away from stepping out of teaching and retiring. I was like, that's how much time I got, man. We're going to get this thing rolling.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, if it takes a long time to get the financial aspect, I think, viable.
Right.
And we've been really lucky to get our Patreon kind of going, and get that to be a significant source of income. But we haven't actually fully monetized. We don't do ads. And so when we do, when we turn on that revenue stream, it should be, it, I want to wait until it's actually going to be worth it. But when we do, it would be really significant. And that hopefully will be something that we can continue to grow and continue to kind of nurture going forward. And I'd love to retire early and be able to just do the show. So that's kind of the
Yeah.
goal, is like build it enough to where it's a little bit harder for us. I envy you in some ways, because you only have to come up with enough income to support one guy. And I mean, it sounds like your wife probably has her own career. But with me and Duncan, we'd have to split everything. So we
Yes.
have to make this podcast big enough to support two
Two
adults
families.
living in California. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's
So
nuts. You guys
yeah.
are like 3 times as much. I'm here in North Carolina.
Yeah,
And I
no, I
mean,
mean,
nothing's cheap anymore, but we're not California expensive.
no, I mean, I live in literally one of the most expensive places on earth, not just California, but right next to
Oh,
Silicon Valley by the beach.
yes.
And
My yeah, I've got family in San Jose, and
mhm,
we were there a few years back, and we just, we were just picking up little advertisements for homes just for fun. And
yeah.
you got to be kidding me. Oh
Yeah, and it's even
my
worse where
God.
we are. We're about an hour from San Jose, right next to the ocean. So this is like where
Yeah.
everybody wants to be, and all the tech bros can afford it. So
Yep.
it's brutal. But the nice thing is that if we were to get to that point where we could quit our jobs, we could do this from anywhere. So
Yes.
that's the other great thing about podcasting. It's super mobile. Duncan and I live together now. We actually both ended up getting separated from our spouses at the same time.
Oh no.
And right after quarantine, it's amicable on all sides. We're great friends with our spouses. But we ended up moving in together. We had lived together before. And when we were
Well, you
younger,
got to, man. I mean,
yeah.
I
And
mean, it's so expensive to live.
it is, and now it's super convenient because we can podcast whenever we want.
Right.
We're recording later today, I think, like right, a couple hours after this, and we just can do it in our pajamas, which is great.
Yes, for sure.
But
I'm
we
sure
could
you're,
realistically move
yeah.
anywhere. We could move to North Carolina if we were able to do this, and that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to get out of this area. I'm really stuck here because of my job, and I do love the area, but I would be fine anywhere else where it's more affordable as well.
Yes. Yeah. Affordable. Yeah. We're not too bad, but like my house in Covina, California, in LA County, when we moved in 1987, I can't even tell you how big that lot is, but it was suburbs, right?
Mm,
So it was, I don't know, quarter acre, less than a quarter acre of land, ranch family house, just, all one level. I think that thing sold for like $200,000 or $300,000 in 1987, which
hmm.
was like double the price my parents paid for it, whatever year, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then I looked it up, and it's like $900,000 now.
Oh yeah.
I
I'm
was
surprised it's under
like,
a million. That's wild.
you got to be kidding me, because my parents now, well, like their house now is on 4 acres of land. They have like a 3,000 square foot home, all this space, whole separate building, and that here in North Carolina is only about 500,000.
Wow. Yeah. That's amazing.
It's nuts. It's nuts, man.
I gotta move.
Uh, yeah, I'm gonna get in. I also told my wife, I said, real estate. I might get into real estate for a
No kidding.
retirement gig.
I know. That
For
is,
sure. Start selling stuff.
yeah. It's not getting any cheaper, that's for sure.
All right, Shane. I ask all my guests about the same 6 questions at the end of the show. It's fun to hear all the different answers. What is your favorite smell?
Oh, this is gonna be weird, but well, my favorite like good standard smell that a lot of people like is lavender. I love the smell of
Yeah,
lavender. I'm actually growing some just because I love it, and
yeah. I've
um,
got some lavender incense burning right now.
yeah, it's. I know that's kind of generic, but it is one of my favorites. And then probably my favorite smell that's a little. I know a lot of people feel the same way, but a lot of people also think I'm weird. Is gasoline. I just like anytime I
Ah,
go get gas for my car, I just love it. I love the smell of
yeah.
gasoline, and I would.
That's your
It's.
1990s hoodlum coming out right there.
I know you would think like I've never huffed, but I sure wanted to. It's tempting, even to this day.
Well, what's your favorite kind of sandwich?
Oh, there is this place in Santa Cruz. It is right next to where I work. It's called Garden Liquors and Deli, and they have a sandwich called the Italian Special, and it's roast beef and pesto,
Yeah.
and it's warm. It is amazing. I'm actually, now that I think about it, maybe I'll drive there and get one after this because oh my god, it's so good.
That sounds amazing. What's your favorite kind of drink?
I drink so much diet soda. You can see I'm drinking a cherry diet Coke right now.
Hey, I drink a cherry drink, and here it's called cheer wine.
Nice, nice. Yeah. It's weird that I, for some reason, don't drink much coffee, but I like caffeine these days. And so
Yeah.
I'm just like pounding diet soda all the time.
Uh, um, what's something that makes you happy every time you get a chance to do it?
Uh, that is a good question. I love to play basketball. I've played since I was a kid. I don't know if it makes me happy every time because I managed to hurt my shoulder pretty bad a few years ago,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so it just kind of makes me it
Yeah.
makes me sad if I can't play it. But I've been
Right.
able to get out and play a little bit lately. My shoulder, I've been rehabbing the rotator cuff,
Right.
but I love playing basketball. And that's probably the only thing that always makes me happy, again, unless there's an injury involved, because I love doing comedy, but boy, comedy doesn't always make you happy. There's
I can
times when
bet.
you get on stage
I
and it
can
doesn't
bet.
go as well as you wanted. I got to the point where it almost never. Once you get to a certain level, you almost kind of never bomb. You'll do little, but you have to do little bar shows and little open mics to try new
Yeah.
stuff. And then
Yeah.
when those things don't work, it's so frustrating.
Hmm.
So comedy doesn't always make me happy, but I did enjoy it a lot. But yeah, probably basketball.
So if you could send your younger self a little tidbit of advice, what would you tell a younger Shane Rogers?
We just did an after midnight episode on that. So every other
Yeah.
week we do an episode that's just for patrons, and we do a video component of that, and we live stream it. And one of our recent episodes was the top 5 pieces of advice that we would give to our younger selves. It would be interesting. I'd have to read to see what we came up with. But the main thing is to not take yourself so seriously. Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
really important in life. This sounds so trite, but like to smile and maintain a
Yeah.
good attitude. I remember being a younger man, I always thought it was so important to be like complicated and tortured and like dark,
That
like an artist and
was
be
the 90s brooder.
it was, that
Yeah.
was Nirvana, right? That was the grunge
Yep.
era. And it's just that's the worst. Like, don't go through life taking yourself seriously and moping. Like, just try to be the person that people want to spend time with, because no one wants to spend
Yeah.
time with the mopey guy. Just smile and
Yep.
have a good time and try to enjoy life. Don't worry about, like, I was a musical purist. I only like certain types of music and certain artists. And it's like, now I'll listen. I love
Right.
Taylor Swift. I don't care. Like, I listen to
Yeah. Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
And, stop taking yourself so seriously. It's not a big deal. Try to enjoy life.
All right. And almost done. What's one of the most beautiful things you've ever gotten to see?
Wow. I have been lucky enough to do a lot of traveling. With the circus, I've been to almost every state in America, and then I've been done a lot of traveling on my own and with friends and with family. Um, boy, I am trying to think of the most beautiful. I think one of my favorite places that I've been is Greece, and we went to the island of
Yeah.
Rhodos, and just the Mediterranean water. It's just and this kind of it has such a classic aesthetic.
Yes. Yes.
I think of all the places I've been, maybe that stands out in my mind. Obviously, there's, all of the island, all of the Greek islands. We spent a week or no 5 days or so on Crete, which was
Yeah.
beautiful.
I bet so. Mine is water too. It's my son and I were on the beach at Tampa Bay, and the sun setting over the ocean was quite magnificent to watch it. And
Florida is amazing.
I was unaware that the Gulf side of the beach, you can walk like a mile out there. It's so shallow, and I had
Oh
no
yeah,
clue. And that was cool to be 100 yards from the beach, and still like the water is like at my waist,
yeah.
and
That's actually in
it's
Crete.
nuts.
There's a beach that's like that in Crete where you can just walk out forever and you're looking back and it's like you're in the middle of the ocean, but you're only up to your waist.
Yeah,
And they're famous for pink sand. They have pinkish sand there,
sweet.
and it's incredible looking.
Yeah,
The other thing that you brought up Florida. My ex-wife, we were in Florida for a cruise. We were going on a cruise out of Miami, and there was a hurricane that actually was threatening to come through and didn't end up hitting Miami, but we were stuck in Miami,
right.
and no one else came. Everyone canceled their trip to Miami. So all of a sudden, we were on there's North Beach and South Beach, and you can walk up and down. And normally that's just packed with people. It would be
Right,
just
right, right.
umbrellas blanketing the sand.
Yeah.
And there was not another person on the beach. It was warm. There was in the distance there were storms and thunderclouds, and there was lightning. But where we were was amazing, and we were out in the water, and we were the only people on that incredibly popular
Sweet.
tourist stretch of beach.
Yeah.
So it was just one of these magical moments where like we had this entire. It felt a little apocalyptic because it was like very strange that no one else was
Right.
there.
It's like if no one else is here, why are we here?
It was a little creepy, but also just really magical and amazing.
Oh, I love it. All right. And my last question is to help sustain the podcast. Who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast? Somebody that's been doing something for a really long time, is really passionate about what they do.
Oh boy, that is a good question. Who can I think of who would be a good guest?
No pressure.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I might have to get back to you on that one. You could certainly have Duncan on here. He'd be fun. He's a great guest.
He sounds great, especially since he likes to be drunk when he does podcasts. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
I can't
so
wait,
we
man.
we do have a rule about on our podcast that he can't drink before, which is I noticed that he messaged me during this show, and I think that he is saying when are we going to record, and I think part of the reason is because as soon as we finish recording, then he can start
Yeah.
drinking because he's not allowed to
Right.
drink before. So he's excited to do it. But yeah, I'll have to think about that. I'll do some brainstorming. I have a lot of comedian friends, so the nice thing about our after midnight episodes is that every once in a while we'll have a comedian on, and that's been fun. And they always make most of the time they make really good podcast guests because they are
Yeah, I
very
could think so.
quick-witted and funny.
Yeah,
So yeah,
man.
I'll think about that.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of things I'm probably going to do on a podcast once I retire from public education that I don't do now.
Yeah, that's true. You have to be a little
I'm
careful. I
gonna.
I do too in my job, but we for the most part are pretty. Luckily, there are not a lot of things that come to my mind that are
Right.
cancelable. But Duncan,
Yeah.
on the other hand, I have to like We've had to do some editing before.
Those are the best kind of friends to have, right there.
Absolutely.
Um, do you ever do stand up at your resort that you work at? Do they ever have you come up on stage and do something for guests?
No, and it's funny. We have had stand-up comedy shows over the last few months at the resort. It's the first time they've tried this. They came to me
Yeah.
and asked if I would help book it and perform. And I was like, I'm not getting anywhere near that. I don't want anything to do with doing stand up at my job. I actually
Right.
did get in trouble one time for it was so ridiculous. I did like a local show. It was a very low key, like small, it was a brewery that had this comedy show, and I was trying new stuff and I was just winging it. And there was no reason for me to censor myself.
Right.
No one was recording it. It wasn't going to end up anywhere. But I got called into the general manager's office and he was like, just wanted to throw this out there, but one of your fellow employees, someone who worked in like the main building, was at that show and was offended by some stuff I had talked about. And I was a very, for the most part, clean comic. Like most of my stuff
Yes.
was, I mean, if you go to that website, you'll see bits about Shark Week. You know,
Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
I was very non-controversial, but every once in a while I just throw stuff in just for the hell of it because it was a live experience and I wasn't worried about it ending up online or something.
Yeah.
And I think I had just done some jokes about sex stuff. And this girl was like, she wasn't even offended by it. She just wanted the like employers to know, like, hey, he might be, out there representing this resort and making it look bad. And
Mm.
so it was a funny conversation to have. I was like, hey, I'm going to pretend like this conversation isn't happening because I'm going to say whatever the hell I want in my
Right.
personal life, and you
Yeah.
guys can go fuck yourselves. Like I
Right.
literally told that to my boss and he was like, I get it. I'm just saying, we just want to make sure that you're representing the resort. And I'm like, I'm not representing the resort. When I'm on
No.
stage, I'm representing
Right.
me. I'll make
That's
sure
right.
that I'm going to do my best to make sure that nothing that could be potentially controversial ends up online. And that is what I will promise you. But beyond that, I'm going to say whatever the hell I want. And
Yeah.
so I was pretty annoyed by that. That was very frustrating.
Yeah.
Um,
Don't you hate those people? Like, they could have come to you if they worked there. They're like, hey, maybe you should do stuff like that on stage.
And
And like,
it was funny because the person who had complained was not a person that I would consider to be very PC. And I
right.
am a person who's mostly pretty PC. Like I'm a very sort of liberal guy. I'm very careful. I have pretty, I don't want to offend anyone.
Yeah.
And she's someone who was not that way. So it was interesting that happened. But, and she and I are actually friends. It was fine. It all worked out. But, it just, yeah, that was one thing that, it was shocking to me that
Yeah.
anyone else was shocked by.
We got a lot of those folks in education too. A lot of people will complain to the higher ups instead of just coming to you and say,
Yeah,
"Oh, I didn't like what you were doing here," but they'll go tell your boss that instead, but they won't tell you.
it's funny because there is this idea that like in comedy you have to be so careful about everything you say. And man, I don't know. I'm in the clubs, or was, up until a while ago, on a regular basis. I still go watch comedy. I still go hang with my
Yeah.
friends. And I mean, people are still getting away with saying just bonkers off the wall
I
stuff
got to
as well.
say, the most popular comics say the worst kinds of things,
Oh,
man.
I don't know if anyone, I don't know if
So,
you watched, they just had on Netflix the roast of Tom Brady. I
yeah,
mean,
I mean, any of those roasts, Comedy Central,
yeah,
Netflix, I mean, you just get prepared for the worst kinds
e-
of things to get thrown
everyone
out
on,
at everybody. Yeah.
everyone on that roast had a joke about Aaron Hernandez hanging himself. I mean, it just like it was brutal. And I thought
Yes.
a lot of it was really funny. A lot of it was offensive, but at the same time, it's like, that's what you come for. Don't watch the roast if you're going to be offended. So, uh,
Right.
it, yeah. And I'm not one of
Right.
those, hey, culture warriors who's concerned that I'm being censored, because I felt like, hey, if as long as it's funny, audiences will let you get away with anything. They just will.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
make it
Yeah. Yeah.
funny. Like if it's not, people who complain about I'm being censored, it's usually because you're just trying to say offensive things and they're not that funny. And that's the
Right.
problem.
Yep. It's all in the delivery. That's for sure. I was scrolling through my phone this morning because I woke up way too early, and it was the biggest hits of what's her name, Nikki Glazier,
She was
her
on the roast.
comedian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She's always on them, but it was like her biggest burns, throughout the years of roasting people. And I mean, it's just awful.
Oh yeah.
and
No,
and
she's
uh,
blowing up right now because she
yeah,
had hands down the best set on that roast and it was brutal. Like,
yeah,
I mean, I was sitting there laughing and at the same time going like, "Oh god, I
yes.
can't believe she said that."
Yeah,
Oh,
she
it's
was.
vicious.
She was talking. It was the roast of Bruce Willis,
Yeah.
and she's right there, just roasting him, and his family is right there, and she's bringing them up, and oh,
Oh yeah.
I was like,
Nothing
man, Yeah.
nothing's off limits. I think the only thing they do, like on the Tom Brady roast, I guess I was reading a little behind the scenes stuff that they had. The one thing they had said was that his kids were off limits, but beyond that, I mean, it was no holds barred. It was
Right.
rough.
Mm. Yeah, I can only imagine. That one I have to watch maybe by myself.
Oh, just watch her set, and you'll get the idea. You'll
You'll
just be
get the
like,
gist of
"Wow,
it.
that is
Yeah.
off the charts."
She's great. Well, Shane, you've been a great guest, man. I love talking to you. Check out Shane's podcast for sure. Midnight Facts for Insomniacs. It's available wherever you get your podcast at, man. And check out the website for them. They got a lot of great pictures of him and his co-host Duncan through the years. Those are great. If you're about my age, if you're 40 something, you're going to see some great throwback pictures.
That's right.
That'll bring you right back to your high school and college days, man. Uh,
Absolutely.
Shane, I really appreciate you coming on the show, man. This has been a blast.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I had a good time.
Remember, folks, find out what makes you happy and get to it. There's a lot of life out there to live, so make it a good one. Be kind, be nice, be good, and everybody have a great week.